There is a specific quality of stillness inside a well-organized Japanese home that has no Western equivalent. It is not merely the absence of clutter. It is the presence of something else entirely, a kind of ordered calm that settles on you the moment you cross the threshold, before you have consciously registered a single detail about the room. I am Keiko Nakamura. I am 72 years old. I have lived inside this philosophy my entire life, and I want to give you its practical architecture today, habit by habit, without ornamentation or delay. These 10 habits are not aesthetic preferences. They are functional systems that produce a specific result. A home that does not become messy because it is organized in a way that makes mess structurally difficult to sustain. That is a different and far more valuable outcome than a home that is periodically cleaned back to order. Every habit here is distinct from anything covered in previous discussions. We are going deeper. Let us begin immediately. Habit 1. Assign energy levels to storage locations. Japanese home organization operates on a principle most Western organizing advice completely ignores. Not all storage locations are equal, and not all objects deserve equal accessibility. The relationship between how frequently an object is used and how easily it can be reached must be deliberately matched. When this matching is wrong, mess is the inevitable result. In Japan, this principle is understood as a matter of household design. Objects used daily belong in what I call zero-effort zones. The location you can reach without bending, stretching, opening multiple doors, or moving other objects. Objects used weekly belong one layer deeper. Objects used monthly or seasonally belong in true storage, requiring genuine effort to access. The reason this prevents mess is straightforward. When daily objects live in difficult locations, people stop returning them properly. They leave them out because returning them is effortful. The counter accumulates objects not because people are careless, but because the storage system creates friction against correct behavior. Audit your home with this question applied to every category of object. Are my most used items in my most accessible locations? In most homes, the answer is no. Frequently used items have drifted to inconvenient locations over time, and the inconvenience of returning them is precisely what keeps them perpetually displaced. Reorganize one zone at a time, moving your highest use items into zero-effort positions and pushing lower-use items deeper into storage. The result is a home where returning objects to their correct location requires less effort than leaving them displaced. When correct behavior becomes the easier behavior, it becomes the automatic behavior. Habit 2. The Transition Object Protocol. Every home has what I call transition objects, items that are neither in use nor fully stored. The jacket just removed, the bag just brought inside, the glasses set down momentarily, the book carried from room to room. These objects exist in a state of active displacement, and their management is the difference between a home that stays organized and one that perpetually accumulates surface clutter. Japanese homes address transition objects through designated intermediate zones, not permanent storage locations, but specific, bounded, intentional spaces where objects in transition may legitimately rest without constituting clutter. The critical design principle is that these intermediate zones must be visually contained and physically limited in size. A single hook, not a row of hooks. A small tray, not an expansive counter. A specific chair, not an entire room where anything may be deposited. The physical limitation of the zone prevents it from expanding to accommodate unlimited transition objects, which would simply recreate the original problem in a designated location. When an intermediate zone reaches capacity, it triggers an automatic sorting obligation. The zone is full, therefore everything in it must be processed to its correct permanent location before anything new may enter. The zone's finite size creates a natural rhythm of processing that prevents accumulation from compounding. Identify the 3 or 4 locations in your home where transition objects most commonly accumulate. Design a specific, physically bounded intermediate zone at each location. Establish the rule that these zones are processed completely each evening during your reset routine. The chronic surface clutter at these locations will largely disappear because the objects now have a legitimate temporary home with a built-in processing schedule. Habit 3. Shitsuke, the discipline of maintained standards. Shitsuke is the fifth and often least discussed element of the Japanese 5S organizational methodology, and it is the element that determines whether the other four produce lasting results or temporary ones. It translates roughly as sustained discipline or the maintenance of established standards without ongoing supervision or motivation. Most home organization fails not in its initial implementation, but in its maintenance. A closet is organized beautifully and 3 months later has returned to chaos. A kitchen system is established and within weeks, the counters are cluttered again. The organization was real. The shitsuke was absent. Shitsuke operates through two mechanisms. First, the establishment of explicit standards rather than vague intentions. Not a general intention to keep the kitchen counter clear, but a specific standard. This counter contains only the kettle and the fruit bowl at all times, and every other object present represents a failure of standard requiring immediate correction. The specificity of the standard makes deviation obvious and unambiguous. Second, Shitsuke operates through regular, scheduled standard audits. Once weekly, walk your home with your explicit standards in mind and note every deviation, not to feel guilty about deviations, but to correct them and investigate their cause. A recurring deviation in the same location indicates a system failure, not a personal failure. The system needs adjustment. Write your home standards explicitly. For each room, define what the correct state looks like in specific, observable terms. Review these standards weekly. Treat deviations as information about where your systems need redesign rather than evidence of personal inadequacy. This is how Japanese homes maintain their organization across years and decades rather than achieving it periodically and losing it repeatedly. Habit 4. The single specimen principle. Japanese aesthetic philosophy, particularly as expressed in ikebana flower arrangement and traditional interior design, consistently demonstrates a counterintuitive truth about visual impact. A single well-chosen object commands more attention, creates more beauty, and contributes more to a sense of order than a collection of similar objects ever can. This principle, which I call the single specimen principle, has direct and powerful organizational implications. In most Western homes, objects exist in quantities that dilute their individual significance and collectively create visual noise. 6 throw pillows where 2 would serve better. A dozen candles where 1 creates the intended atmosphere. Multiple decorative objects on a single surface where 1 would have more presence and the surface would feel more peaceful. The single specimen principle asks you to identify the best one within each category of decorative or semi-functional objects and release the rest. Not the one you paid most for, not the one someone gave you, the one that, placed alone in a clean space, you would choose to look at every day. This principle also applies to functional objects where redundancy has accumulated without intention. 3 wooden spoons in the kitchen utensil holder where 1 would serve every actual need. 7 coffee mugs in active rotation for a household of 2. 4 throws distributed around the living room, creating perpetual tidying obligations. Reducing to the single best specimen in each category produces 2 simultaneous benefits. The remaining objects have more visual dignity and are more genuinely appreciated, and the spaces they occupy become visibly calmer, requiring less ongoing management to maintain their appearance. Habit 5. Soji as spatial meditation. I want to offer a dimension of the daily soji practice not previously explored. The physical practice of daily cleaning in Japanese culture is understood as simultaneously a practice of mental clarification. These two outcomes are not considered separate effects of the same activity. They are considered the same outcome expressed in two different registers. When you clean a surface with full attention, attending to the physical sensation of the cloth, the visual feedback of the surface becoming clear, the sound and rhythm of the motion, you are practicing a form of active meditation that produces measurable reductions in cortisol and anxiety. This is not philosophy. It is documented in research on attentional focus and stress response. The organizational implication is significant. People who practice Soji as a meditative activity rather than a chore bring a quality of attention to their home that prevents the accumulation of disorder at its source. They notice the beginning of clutter before it becomes established clutter. They address small disorganization before it compounds into large disorganization. They are present to their environment in a way that people treating cleaning as an obligation to be minimized are not. Begin one cleaning task daily with a deliberate decision to give it your full attention for its entire duration. No mental planning of other tasks, no ambient media, simply the task and your complete presence to it. 5 minutes of fully attentive surface cleaning produces more actual cleanliness than 15 minutes of distracted, obligation-motivated scrubbing, and it produces the secondary benefit of a mind that is measurably calmer at the end of those 5 minutes than at the beginning. Habit 6. The negative inventory method. Most home organization focuses on what is present. Japanese organizational philosophy gives equal attention to what is absent, specifically to the deliberate maintenance of empty capacity within every storage system in your home. I call this the negative inventory method. Rather than measuring how much storage you have and filling it completely, you measure how much empty space you maintain as a deliberate, protected resource. The practical value of maintained empty capacity is significant and multiple. Empty capacity in a storage system means that new objects arriving in your home can be immediately and properly stored without requiring existing organization to be disturbed or compressed. When storage is filled to capacity, every new arrival triggers a displacement crisis. Something must move to accommodate it, and the path of least resistance is the nearest available surface. Empty capacity also serves as an organizational pressure gauge. When your negative inventory, your empty storage space, begins declining, you receive early warning that your overall object volume is increasing toward the threshold where your organizational systems will begin failing. This early warning gives you time to conduct a release review before the tipping point is reached, rather than after the mess has become established. Maintain a target of approximately 20 to 30% empty capacity within every storage system in your home. Closets, drawers, cabinets, and shelves should all have visible breathing room. When any storage area approaches full capacity, that is your trigger for a release review of that category, not a trigger to acquire additional storage. Habit 7. Contextual grouping over categorical grouping. Standard organizational advice groups, objects by category, all books together, all kitchen tools together, all cleaning supplies together. Japanese organizational practice often takes a more nuanced approach that I find considerably more effective in actual daily use. It groups objects by context of use. Contextual grouping places together not what objects are, but what activities they support. Everything needed for your morning tea ritual lives together in one location. Whether those objects are technically kitchen items, pantry items, or even items that would traditionally belong in a different room. Everything needed for your evening reading practice lives together. Everything needed for your correspondence or bill-paying lives together. The organizational advantage is that contextual grouping eliminates the micro-friction of gathering objects from multiple locations every time you perform a routine activity. When all the elements of a regular activity live together, the activity flows without interruption, without scattering objects across multiple surfaces as you assemble what you need, and without the displacement that occurs when items gathered from multiple locations are not returned precisely to their correct individual locations afterward. Identify your 5 or 6 most regular daily activities and map what objects each requires. Then create a dedicated contextual zone for each activity where all required objects live together. Your home will become noticeably easier to use daily, and the tidying required after each activity will reduce substantially because everything returns to a single location rather than multiple separate ones. Habit 8. The Annual Object Census. Japanese homes traditionally undergo a thorough year-end cleaning and review called osoji, but the element I want to isolate and examine here is the census function of that practice, not the cleaning, the counting and evaluating. Once yearly, conducted with genuine thoroughness, every object in each category within your home is counted and its continued presence evaluated against your current life, not the life you lived when you acquired it. Not the life you imagine you might live in the future, your current, actual daily life as it exists right now. The annual census is distinct from decluttering triggered by visible overflow. Most people only address object accumulation when it has become a visible problem. The annual census addresses it on schedule before problems develop, making it a maintenance practice rather than a recovery practice. The census asks 4 questions for each object or category of objects. Is this used in my current regular life? Does this represent who I am today rather than who I was? Is this the best version of this object I own, or is it a duplicate or inferior version that persists through inertia? Does this object earn its space through genuine value, or does it occupy space through accumulated habit? Objects that cannot answer yes to at least 2 of these 4 questions are candidates for release. The annual census typically produces a meaningful reduction in object volume, keeps your organizational systems from gradually filling beyond their designed capacity, and maintains the breathing room within your home that prevents the incremental accumulation of mess. Habit 9. Sound and scent as organizational cues. This habit addresses a dimension of home organization that is almost never discussed, and that I have found genuinely powerful in maintaining daily order. The use of sensory cues beyond the visual to reinforce organizational behavior. In Japanese home practice, the sensory environment of the home is understood as inseparable from its physical organization. A home that smells clean and ordered supports the maintenance of cleanliness and order. A home with deliberate sound boundaries between active and restful spaces supports the functional integrity of those spaces. The practical application is this: develop specific sensory associations with your organizational routines. A particular incense or candle scent, lit only during your daily soji, creates a conditioned cue that your nervous system associates with the calm, attentive state, optimal for cleaning and organizing. Over time, the scent alone begins to induce that state before you have consciously shifted into it. Similarly, specific ambient sound associated with your weekly reset routine, whether silence, particular music, or natural sound, creates a contextual frame that makes the routine feel distinct from regular activity, and therefore easier to enter and sustain. These sensory anchors are not decorative preferences. They are behavioral engineering tools that reduce the motivational friction of organizational maintenance by associating it with sensory states your nervous system has learned to find pleasant and calming. The routine becomes something you move toward rather than something you push yourself into. Habit 10, the living audit, your home as ongoing conversation. The 10th habit is the one that integrates all others and determines whether they produce a one-time improvement or a permanent transformation. It is the habit of treating your home as an ongoing conversation rather than a completed project. A home is not a problem to be solved. It is a relationship to be maintained. Your life changes continuously. Your needs, your activities, your physical capacities, your aesthetic sensibilities, your daily routines, all of these evolve across months and years. A home organization system designed for who you were 2 years ago will gradually fall out of alignment with who you are today. And that misalignment produces mess just as surely as any shortage of organizational skill. The living audit is a practice of continuous, lightweight assessment of whether your home's organization continues to fit your current life. Not a formal scheduled review, but a cultivated habit of noticing when something in your home is not working and asking why it is not working, rather than simply working harder to make it work despite its misalignment. When you find yourself consistently not returning an object to its designated location, the living audit asks not why you lack the discipline to do so, but whether the designated location still makes sense for how you actually use that object. When a particular surface accumulates clutter persistently, the living audit asks what organizational gap is being revealed rather than simply clearing the surface again. This continuous noticing and adjusting transforms your relationship with your home from one of periodic battle and recovery to one of ongoing attentive stewardship. The home becomes something that responds to your attention and care by remaining organized rather than something that requires constant, forcible correction. Japanese homes that maintain their characteristic calm across decades do so through this quality of attentive, ongoing relationship. The organization is never finished because life never stops changing, but the home remains organized because its inhabitants remain in active, responsive conversation with it. That conversation is available to you. It begins the moment you stop asking why your home is messy and start asking what your home is trying to tell you about what is not working. Listen carefully. The answer is always there, in the pile on the counter, in the drawer that sticks, in the closet that never quite closes. Each one is a message. The living audit teaches you to read them. These 10 habits, practiced together and maintained as living systems, rather than implemented once and abandoned, produce the kind of home that does not become messy because it is organized in alignment with how real human life is actually lived. That alignment is the secret, not discipline, not minimalism, not the right storage products. Alignment between how your home is organized and how your life is genuinely lived. That is what Japanese home organization has always understood. That is what these 10 habits deliver.